Hello, BookTube. This is Aaron from Aaron Read a Book or Aaron Read a Book. I just filmed my Friday reads and then I looked at it back, and the first minute or so um, was the sound wasn't working and my microphone wasn't working. It must have died, and then all of a sudden it starts working. So, this is going to be a different intro to the rest of the video, and then you'll notice when it jumps back. Um, Basically, I was just saying that I haven't made a Friday reads in a couple of weeks, and I was largely in the middle of books last Friday, so I didn't do it, but um, maybe I should. I do like hearing about other people in the middle of books, so I don't know why it puts me off making one. Um, but yeah, so that's basically what I was saying, and in the original intro, and then I jumped onto the first book I read, which was The Small House at Allington by Anthony Trollope, um, and it's the fifth book in the Chronicles of Barsetshire, and then I will pop forward in time to my actual video. And this one's very different from the first four I found. It reminded me much more of The Way We Live Now. It's kind of a mixture between the Way We Live Now and Trollope's more romantic, traditional novels in the Barsetshire Chronicles. In that, in The Way We Live Now, there's loads of characters you don't like, and in this, you follow quite a lot um, characters that are very questionable, and this is the biggest one by quite a what by quite a way so far. So you spend a lot of time with them, and they are very sort of multi-layered and deep. So you do have sympathy even with the one main character that you really not meant to like, I guess. Um, and this is not a traditional love story in any way. That the every relationship or potential relationship in is in trouble in some way. So it's a not. It seems to be a bit of an attack on marriage, because every marriage seems to have gone badly in this. But it is very enjoyable. Katie from Books and Things said this is her favourite, and I can sort of see why, because it is completely sort of different. So I think most people will either love it or not like it as much as the other ones, and I'm sort of a little bit on the fence in that I am a sucker for the sort of Doctor Thorne type ones where everything works out in the end, and it's nice and sort of sweet. But this was very interesting. I wonder what the last one's going to be like, because the last one's a big chunker as well. Um, the other interesting thing with this one is that Plantagenet Pallister gets introduced as well as a sort of very minor side character, and obviously he's one of the main focuses of the Pallister series. So it's sort of transitioning into the Pallister series now. So I don't know when I'll read. I need to read. I think I'm going to read the last book, the last Chronicle of Barsetshire. Was it the last Chronicle of Barset? I'll read that this year, and then start on the Pallister novels next year. But yeah, another fun top. It's not my favourite in the series. My favourite is still either Doctor Thorne or Barchester Towers. I can't really decide between them. Next up was a book I have mentioned briefly as well, which was Ancestors, a Prehistory of Britain in Seven Burials by Professor Alice Roberts. Um, this I read for the first quarter of Historathon, and it I wanted to read something about Britain, but before the Romans, which is quite difficult because there is no written record of that time really. We can only trust what the Romans say, and they're not very kind. um, so it's looking at the culture of Britain, the changing culture of Britain. It covers a long period actually. I can't remember the exact dates, but it's thousands of years, um, from um, seven different burials, and it's very interesting because I really like archaeology and I studied it at sixth form college, and there's all these new techniques with DNA, so they can track from like people's teeth and stuff, the minerals and this. I don't know if this counts. It's not it's DNA, but they can count from the minerals in people's teeth where they were born and what the water was like and stuff. But also, obviously, DNA they can track relations and are these mass burials and stuff people related, and which parts of the world are they from. And it's a lot about the movement of people, and it's very interesting. And you get the impression that it was a lot of movement around these times, especially around the ice ages coming and going, because Britain wasn't always habitable. So the early burials are before an ice age, and then there's an ice age when no one lived there, and then there's later burials. And as the time goes on, I found it slightly more interesting towards sort of the Iron Age and the Copper Age, is it? I found those burials really interesting. But yeah, it was quite. It's an easy read. Alice Roberts is from Time Team, so I was a Time Team nerd when I was younger. I loved it. Which if you're not from England or not have seen it, it was like an archaeology show with Tony Robinson, who's Baldric from Blackadder, um, and he would go along with archaeology teams when they were on digs, and it was really interesting. And Alice Roberts was on that for quite a while, and yeah, she's a good writer. Like she keeps it interesting. It's a bit all over the place. It jumps around a lot, and there was some personal politics around in there that I found out of place, even as someone who agrees with her points. They just felt out of place in the book. Like she goes on quite a few religious rants, and I found it quite uncomfortable. And I'm an atheist, so yeah, that was a bit odd. I wonder if her follow-up book, I think it's called Buried or Burials, um, which I've also got. I wonder if that will have those rants and stuff in, or if people have told her that it's a bit weird. But yeah, it was good to learn about this period, and a really interesting time in archaeology as well, where this traditional archaeology is sort of meeting with um, DNA studies. So she compares it to when carbon dating came in, which revolutionised archaeology, but quite slowly, and like before you only have theories, and then all of a sudden you have like dates. So before we only had theories about whether people were related and stuff, and now we're starting to know. So it's very interesting. But yeah, I don't know if I'll read the Buried or not, because yeah, she put me off a bit with the rants, but maybe I will. She is a decent writer. Next, I went on to author I have read before, Nancy Mitford, The Pursuit of Love. I've read her book Christmas Pudding, which is surprisingly not very Christmassy, but was very funny. And this is her most famous book. It's actually a series of three books: Pursuit of Love, Love in a Cold Climate, and Don't Tell Alfred. And I've got Don't Tell Alfred, and I've definitely got um, Love in a Cold Climate somewhere, but I can't find it, which is really annoying. But yeah, this was a 5-star read for me. I loved it. It was so funny. She's a very witty writer. She's just sort of in the same sort of school as P.G. Wodehouse and Muriel Spark and people like that. And she writes about sort of the well off, um, And this is about her. The main character is basically telling the story of her cousin's love life, and the main character is always staying at the cousin's house because her mother, they call her the bolter. She basically ran off with another man after she was born and left her with her aunt. So it's sort of a big family book, and they all meet at her cousin's house all the time. So it gives me a bit of Catholic Chronicle vibes. But yeah, so she's telling the story of her cousin's love lives, and it goes through pre World War Two, World War Two, and post World War Two. So it covers quite a long time. But that's just the main sort of block of the story. That there's lots and lots of filler outside it about her rather large family, and this is based on her real family. And basically, the Mitford family, when were like the Kardashians of their day, they were like super famous socialites, and all of the sisters did weird things. Like one of them married Oswald Mosley. One of them, who was the leader of the British Union of Fascists. One of them was like best friends with Hitler, like, literally besties with Hitler. And when World War Two started and Germany declared war on England, she shot herself in the head. So, which she survived, and then Hitler packed her off to the UK to recover. Um, and another one was a communist, and Nancy was uh, just the writer, I think. Um, but yes, her real life family is super interesting. So her family in this is super interesting, and her uncle is my favorite character. He's an absolute maniac, and it's based on her dad. Um, and she's just very very funny about everyone in her family, and it's beautifully written as well. I'm definitely going to continue on with this, and I've bought her sister's book, which is called Ons and Rebels, which is sort of the true story of their family, or their childhood, or her perspective of it anyway. So I'm becoming a bit of a Mitford obsessive, and I think that it's a fairly large crowd of people. I think there's still a lot of interest on their family, just because they're all so varied, and apparently their letters to each other are really brilliant as well. So I need to get the letters. But yeah, that was a 5 star read. This next one, did I give it 5 stars? I think this is about four and a half 5 stars as well. And that is the Spy Who Came In From the Cold by John le Carré. I didn't really understand the fuss about John le Carré because um, the I read the first book in the George Smiley series, which is Call for the Dead, and I thought it was sort of not that great. I thought it was decent, but it wasn't very espionage-y. It's more of a detective-y kind of thing, and so I wasn't expecting this to be so amazing, even though I've heard loads of people talking about how good it is. But I loved it. It was so good. And it's quite short, and I don't want to go into any major plot details because it's very twisty and turny. But it's basically about a spy who he's in the Berlin operation, um, in the early 60s. So where East and West Germany are still separated, and his whole operation goes under. Basically, everyone's killed, and he comes back to England and is put out into the cold. So basically, the service kicks him out, and he just lives a normal, very sad and horrible life. But does he? Is he really out in the cold? That's the question. Or is he still working for MI6? I think from my tone you can tell that he is. But yeah, this that's just the start of the book. Um, so he's basically living an undercover ruse, and oh yeah, I won't go into any more details, but it's brilliantly done. And Smiley's very much an outside character in this. You follow Alex, what's it, Alec Lemus, something like that. Yeah, Alec Lemus. Um, and yeah, it's very, very twisty and dark, dark, quite dark. Yeah, it felt very realistic, and a lot of people say that about John le Carré because he was an actual spy, but in the in the essay he writes at the end of this in this edition, he's saying none of this was real, and it made me a massive celebrity, and everyone thought I was writing about real life, but I wasn't. I was a very minor and boring type of spy. So he insists it's not real, but it feels like what the real Cold War spies would have been like. Um, but very, very good. I definitely going to read some more of these. Yeah, I skipped the second one. I think I've got the feeling the first two are not as loved, so I didn't feel like I missed much of not reading the second one. But yeah, very good. And the last book I read was I'm trying not to read too many mysteries because I want to do loads in March, um, but I can't help myself. So I did pick up From Doon with Death by Ruth Rendell, and this was recommended to me on one of my videos by commentator Regina. She told me if I like Agatha Christie, might like Ruth Rendell, and I do get the comparison. It's the most Agatha Christie of any other author I've read, I guess. And I kind of dismissed Ruth Rendell because she's such like a household name in the UK. Like there's loads of adaptations of her books, and they're always like Ruth Rendell's X Y Z. Like it's always her name in the title, um, and just her books are all over charity shops and stuff. And I don't know, something about her name as well. I just assumed she was sort of a trashy type of writer, but she's actually really quite a good writer as well, like on the page. And I really enjoyed this. This was it's an interesting. It's the first in her Wexford novel, so her main character is Inspector Wexford, and then there's an essay by her in this as well at the end where she says she just meant this to be a standalone. She didn't realise she was going to become a detective writer. So you don't actually learn a great deal about Wexford and Burden, who's sort of an assistant. You only get little glimpses of them, and she says in the later ones she makes him a bit warmer as well, because he's a bit snarky in this. But it's an interesting story. It's the murder victim is this woman who's just sort of quite a boring life. She's a housewife in a village, and or I don't know if it's a village or a town. It feels like a village, and she's returned there after spending some of her childhood there with her new husband, and she's murdered. And her husband says like she's basically got no friends. She knows no one. She lives a very quiet life. Uh, doesn't have a job outside of the house, the sort of thing. They've got no children, and not really any friends. So she's a very strange murder victim in that. Even one of the characters remarks, "Oh, people like her don't get murdered. People like me do," and like this glamorous woman, because it's quite a posh area, but they're not posh. So the other people in the novel are quite posh and snarky. Um, but yeah, it wasn't like super twisty turny, but I think I kind of guessed the ending. I knew I had a feeling about it, and it was largely right. Um, but I still really enjoyed it. It was still really good, and as it's a first published novel as well, so um, I'm sure they get even better. I've heard her standalone books, and she writes under a different name, which I can't remember. I think it might be something Vine or something. I've heard they're a lot darker, but I quite liked. I don't always like sort of super dark ones, but I'm definitely going to read more of hers. And there's like 25 of these, so I can. There's loads to read, and I might check out the TV series as well when I get a chance. But yeah, very good. So I've got another mystery writer or detective fiction writer to read. I think I've got about 5 or 6 detectives on the go now, so I need to. I've got a lot of stuff to read in March. But yeah, that's it's been a really good couple of weeks of reading. I've been reading a few short ones after the Small House in Allington because I was getting behind in my Goodreads goal, and it started freaking me out. Even though I know, oh, my goal is 100 this year, and I normally only set it to 52 or 70 or something. Um, and I've never made 100, so I know I need to read more than I've ever read before. But my main plan is to read like 20 books in September, so I shouldn't really worry about Goodreads telling me I'm 1 or 2 books behind. But I can't help it. I'm just it makes me anxious. So I've piled out a few short ones. Um, but yeah, how are you doing, BookTube? Do you love John le Carré? I want to hear more about him. I The Spy Coming from the Cold and Tinker Soldier Spy are the two I always hear about. But I'm interested to hear what your favourite le Carré books are. Are you obsessed by the Mitford family, or is it just me? Am I 100 years old? Um, do you like Ruth Rendell? And is The Small House at Allington your favourite of the Barsetshire Chronicles? I've got a feeling I know 1 or 2 other people who it's their favourite, but um, apart from Katie books and things, I don't think it's mine. But if it's yours, let me know. And have you read Pallister? Are they good? Let me know, BookTube. Have a good one.